Good afternoon. You are watching the Every Choice Counts podcast, and I am your host, Dara Berger. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm the author of the book, How to Prevent Autism, documentary filmmaker, health coach, and mother of 2 children, one of whom has autism. And I am very excited to introduce to you my 2 guests who have written the book, Underestimated, JB and Jamie Handley. JB Handley is the best-selling author of the book, How to End the Autism Epidemic. Together with his wife, Lisa, he founded Generation Rescue, a nonprofit organization dedicated to autism recovery. He and his wife also produced the documentary film Autism Yesterday. JB founded Swander Pace Capital, a middle-market private equity firm with more than $1.5 billion under management, where he served as managing director for 2 decades. He is an honors graduate of Stanford University and lives in Portland, Oregon with Lisa and their 3 children. And my next guest is Jamison Handley. He is an 18-year-old non-speaker who was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. Thanks to a new communication method called spelling to communicate, Jamison is now able to fully communicate and switched from a life skills classroom to a regular academic classroom at his high school and will be graduating in 2022. He plans to attend college and study neuroscience. Jamison hopes to inspire others with his story and dedicate his life to advocating for the rights of all non-speakers. He lives in Portland, Oregon with his family. So hi there, JB and Jamie. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have the both of you here.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Of course. Now, I just wanted to say one thing to Jamie because I'm so afraid that I'm going to forget. So what I wanted before we get started with the interview, Jamie, I just wanted to tell you that I'm incredibly impressed by you. And I'm not impressed with people very easily that often. But I'm impressed with you, and I just want to tell you why, because you got this communication tool, and you could have so easily just used it to go on your happy way. You know, get to know your family, get to know your friends, excel at school, go on to college, and whatever wonderful thing you're going to do with your life career-wise. But that wasn't enough for you. You needed to help other children. You needed to help other families. And I don't think that viewers know that it was your idea to write this book. And I know that you also pushed your dad to make this movie that you guys could tell us about at the end. So I just want you to know that I'm incredibly impressed, okay? And your book has already changed my life. I've read it twice, and I will never be the same person, okay? Because I will never look at children with autism the same. I will always look at them with competence first. Not deficit. So I just wanted to say that, and I don't mean to, call you out, embarrass you or any of that, but I just wanted you to know that I'm impressed.
Well, that's very kind, and we will get into it, but Jamie already responded, and I'm going to hit return so you can hear it.
Thank you, Dara.
Aw, thank you. All right, so let's get going because we have a lot of ground to cover, and I'm excited. So JB, first question for you is, let's go back to those days before that text came to you from a well-known mom in the community that's done wonderful things. Tell us about life right before that text.
I mean, it was extremely challenging. We were starting to age out of school, and what was next was a real mystery, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and every autism parent understands the fear you have of not being on this planet with your child and your own mortality. And I would describe it as a pretty dark cloud sitting over our whole family and dark feelings throughout. And I think that what's always been the hardest thing, and I describe it as sort of a permanent knife in your heart, and many autism parents will be able to relate to this, when you have a child that doesn't speak, you don't know. You don't know how they feel. You don't know exactly who they are. You don't know what their hopes and dreams are. You don't know what they're capable of necessarily. And I had started to very, very grudgingly accept that reality, but it hurt every day. There was just a tinge every day because I desperately wanted to know my son the way we all want to know our children. And so I would describe it as a pretty low point in the family overall. Right, we were all feeling it, and then, you know, as you mentioned, an angel kind of showed up, and you know, everything changed.
So tell us about that text that came in.
Yeah, so I received a text out of the blue from a friend, Honey Rinicella, who lives outside of Philadelphia, and she is well known in the community because she's a giving, loving, caring mom of 2 twins with autism, and she's always given herself, whether through TACA or NAA or whatever it might be, to try to help other children. And I would describe our relationship as friends, and we shared a common bond in that her Vince and my Jamie were very similar in terms of being non-speakers with mannerisms, and we were both sort of going through the same struggles together. So it wasn't unusual for us to, you know, share ideas or thoughts about biomed or anything else that might be able to help our kids, as, you know, thousands of parents do. But her text to me was of a completely different and almost incomprehensible sort, because I'll never forget it, right? I'm like sitting there watching my daughter's basketball practice, and I get this text from her, "You won't believe what's happening with Vince, oh my God." And then all of a sudden just screenshots of this really complex language, analytical, thoughtful, insightful language being spewed out about all these different topics. And she's like, "This is Vince, this is Vince." And I'm literally having like a cognitive meltdown, like, what is going on? And I had to jump out of the gym where I was with my daughter and go get on the phone with her. And she basically explained that a few months prior, they would have thought that like the height of Vince's cognitive ability was, "I want juice." And then he started doing this communication method known as spelling to communicate. And now he was writing these incredibly insightful, thoughtful, amazing things. And I really couldn't believe it. And I want to be clear when I say that, what I mean. I knew that Honey wasn't messing with me. You would never do that to another autism parent. I didn't have a doubt in the world that what she was representing was true for her, of course, and that this was happening. I didn't believe what she was telling me, that you could extrapolate this to any nonverbal, non-speaking kid. Okay, not nonverbal. I want to clarify, non-speaker. You could extrapolate what she was doing to any other non-speaker in the world. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. You know, you're telling me that Jamie could be writing words like this too, and that he's all there cognitively, and that he's this intelligent and this insightful and has this much wisdom. It was just really, really hard to wrap my head around. And when I went home, I even filmed Jamie and like texted her the video, like, "Here's Jamie," right? And then she filmed Vince having dinner, where she's like helping him with dinner, right? Because he has fine motor issues, and he has stims, and he has mannerisms. And I think the thing she said, like, pushed me over the edge. She basically said, "Oh, I'm certain Jamie's all there. He can definitely do this." And you know, I think what Honey did in that moment is a really, really important concept. And I guess I would send this message to other parents of kids who are already fluent and already on the boards. She held a bridge of hope, like, for me, when it was kind of impossible for me to do that for myself, right? She gave me a foundation just enough to say, "No, I really do think Jamie can do this too, JB." And as we all know, especially as our kids get a little older, and Jamie was 17 at the time, you know, hope starts to feel like a very dangerous drug, right? We've been through it a million times. The hangover is brutal. We can feel it coming when it comes. We start to not like that relationship to it. Just feels like a high that's going to go away. And I could feel it a little bit, and I was definitely like suppressing it. And yet there was something about the conviction that Honey had behind her words, not to mention what I was seeing Vince write, which is in the book by the details of what were in those texts. And so I got on the phone literally the next day, called Growing Kids Therapy Center in Northern Virginia. And they had somebody drop like a week later. It was nearly Christmas time, 2019, when this happened. And I'm like, "I'll take it." And, you know, we live in Portland, Oregon, so it's no trivial flight. And so we got on a plane, you know, and we went out there. And ironically, my parents happen to live about 2 miles from the Growing Kids clinic. I mean, of all things, right? So I stayed with my mom and dad. And they're like, "What's going on?" You know, I'm like, "I don't know. I'm here. You know, we're going." And I think that What's so amazing about the Spelling to Communicate community, which I really didn't know, is this simple tenet, this mantra, which you already mentioned, the presumption of competence. And it's such a beautiful thing. And what that basically means is just presume they're highly intelligent. Don't presume anything else. Presume they track everything and behave accordingly. That sounds really simple and really trite, but think about the ways that can manifest. For example, read them age-appropriate books. Put on age-appropriate television shows. At my son's well-intended autism school in Portland, Oregon, all the non-speakers were being taught life skills. And, you know, not to fast forward too far, but once this really got going, we were pounding the table like, why not teach them age-appropriate curriculum? Why are we still reading, you know, books from their childhood? And you walk into Growing Kids Therapy Center, they go address the kid, right? They don't like walk up to the parent and act like the kid is only half there, and we've all experienced that so many times. They go, hi, Jamie, welcome. It's so great to have you here. And they don't talk in a slow voice. They don't talk, hello, Jamie. They don't do that.
Nope.
They talk like he's a normal, highly intelligent, fully formed, fully cognitive, fully analytical human being. And we get taken back into a room, and Jamie sits down in a chair at a table, and this amazing woman who figured this whole thing out, whose name is Elizabeth Vossler, she sits down with Jamie, and she does something that I'll truly never forget. She says, she puts her hand on Jamie's shoulder. She says, Jamie, I know how smart you are. Seems really simple, right? No one had ever said that to Jamie with that kind of sincerity before. And I even asked him about it later. And Jamie said, I thought to myself, how did she know? Wow. How did she know? And then he said, and I thought to myself, this is the most adorablest human being I've ever met. His love for her was instant because it was really the first person who saw him and recognized him for really who he was. And then she went through this whole thing with him, and she explained, I know how frustrated you've been. I know how hard this has been. And she took him through the core tenets of Spelling to Communicate, which is basically there's a motor challenge that you have. You can't get your body to do what you want it to do. And this is particularly true of fine motor. And as far as communication goes, fine motor really manifests in three core areas. Your eyes, which nobody thinks about. So many of our kids have ocular apraxia, which means it's very, very hard for them to get their eyes to go where they want them to go. And so imagine trying to bounce your eyes around a letterboard if you can't control where they go. Imagine staring at the computer and trying to look away and you can't, right? I mean, that's what our children are dealing with. Then it's speech, which is all fine motor, right? Very complex in your mouth. And then it's your fingers, right? Trying to force kids to type or to use these little iPads with little things. We're asking them to do the things that are the hardest for them. And S2C recognizes that. And what they do is they bring these letterboards out, and you know that this is like a graduate level one, right?
Yes.
And you just point.
Show everybody the first one. Okay. So the first is 3 of these. It's the alphabet. So I just want to show everybody what that first one is.
Exactly. And so what they basically explain is there's no cognitive issue. None. We don't need to teach them anything. It's all in there. The motor is the problem. Said differently, and I mean, this is so profound that like I want to highlight and underline it like 100 times. They're literally saying autism is not a cognitive disability, it's a motor planning disability. That turns the whole thing upside down. It really does. And all they're really doing by practicing all this spelling is they're myelinating pathways that don't exist between the brain and the arm. And really it's the shoulder that's moving, and that's more of a gross motor motion. And they go through a whole brain map, and I walk through this in the book a little bit, how it's very hard for cognition and fine motor to manifest at the same time for these kids. It's exhausting, things get stuck. But when you bump it over to gross motor, all of a sudden the words can start to flow, okay? And as you know, Spelling to Communicate is a lesson-based therapy. And all that means is there are these 3 or 4 page lessons on all kinds of topics, from the solar system to Abraham Lincoln to state of Montana. It doesn't matter what the lessons are about. They're used to allow the children to practice their spelling. Okay, so they'll read a paragraph and then they'll say, spell a word from that paragraph, and they'll spell it on the board, and then they'll go on. And there's this very methodical progression from asking them to spell words, and then they ask them to fill in a sentence with a word from and then they ask them to, give a little bit of insight, and then they ask them for their opinion. Like, this progresses over months, if not years. And you go from learning how to spell on the board to all of a sudden having to share your own thoughts and feelings, right? That's like the continuum of what we're talking about. So I'm sitting in this chair in December, and we're only there for 2 days. We're only there for 4 hours with Elizabeth, which doesn't feel like anywhere near enough time. And yet by the second hour, Jamie's spelling routinely. He's hitting letters. I'm like, I did not know he could spell, right? I didn't even know he could spell. And then on the second day, Elizabeth Vossler is doing this lesson on plants and like carnivorous plants. And she asks Jamie what the opposite of carnivore is. And I know the opposite of carnivore is not in the lesson. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not in the lesson. How's he going to know what to spell? And Jamie spells herbivore, like, perfectly. And I'm literally, tears are pouring out of my eyes because I'm starting to believe that what Honey told me might actually be true. Because here's this kid, and it's not just that he's doing the spelling, it's the look on his face. It's the pride. He's so regulated. He's so focused. He's so intent. You know your kid. And I'm like, wow, he is really dialed right now. He is really serious about this. It's like he knew where this could possibly take him. And so, you fast. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to ask you one question. So there's a whole spectrum of who this, how it works and everything. And I just want you to explain to people, because a lot of people with your book out there have been making comments like that their child can spell. How's this going to get them to talk? And explain how it's different to ask your child to spell, let's say, treehouse, because they know how to spell it and they do it, to what is actually open communication, we'll call it. Because like my son can speak, but there's no meaningful conversation and there's no initiation of conversation. Yeah.
So it's literally like if you and me lost our ability to speak, but we had this letterboard sitting next to us, and we would spell out full, complex, thoughtful, age-appropriate sentences to communicate with our family. That's what we have with Jamie. Yes, I have that same experience where things get a little bit lost in translation. They go, oh, well, my kid can spell too. It's like, no. He can literally spell. I can ask him a question, then he can spell like a paragraph on a letterboard, or now for him on an iPad, because Jamie's graduated from this to this. Okay, and this is like 16 months in, So like yesterday he was in an interview. I want to be in Hawaii as head of neuroscience for the University of Hawaii. Right? I'm just literally looking on his iPad. Just at some of the, things that we were asking him about the ocean. Yes, I do. I'm very connected to the ocean. I think I feel the energy of the ocean. It's wave energy. Like, these are literally just like sentences he wrote last night when my wife Lisa and I were talking to him. There's many of these in the book, but this is like he can write a term paper, right? It takes a little longer, obviously, but with that level of like complex language and thought, we can have. And when we're out in public, we just carry this around. We can have instant communication, instant conversation with him at any moment in time about any topic. We all know what the signs look like of our children as they become frustrated. And now when I see those, I immediately put a board in front of Jamie and we resolve whatever the issue is. Could be some thought he's having. It could be something he wants that he can't figure out how to communicate. And the frustration level and the outbursts with Jamie have gone from like an 8 to like a 0. We don't have any.
And that's something I wanted to touch on, because it was so remarkable what is described in the book, where it is very common for parents of children with autism to have to be running to their school for behaviors, whether it's self-injurious, whether whatever. And you were a perfect example of that. And I've been an example of that too at times. And you don't know what's happening with your child. Why are they calling me and telling me that Dylan bit 4 people? Dylan never bites people. Like, what happened that day? And you can't find out, but now of course you can. So talk about, like, because I know Jamie wrote in the book what was going on, and you now know.
Yeah, so I would say that the outbursts were going up as he got older, right? And they would include self-injury, and he's a big kid. He's 6'3", 215, right? So most of the teachers at the school are much smaller than him, and so they're justifiably concerned. And so we kind of had to deal with the school that when these outbursts happen, I would basically get in the car and come running. And these were frequent, once or twice a week, kind of frequent, okay? And the precipitating events was something we all sat around. These teachers were well-intended, and it started to become everything, right? Like, everything seemed to be we went outside, we went inside, we had lunch, we didn't have lunch. I mean, it became like it was almost absurd. It's like, okay, so basically at this point, he's just gonna sit in a chair, right? Like, there was like nothing left to do, you know? And the behaviorists were literally making all these charts with, I mean, it was absurd, right? Like, I don't want to be too cynical, but like, if Jamie can sit for 10 minutes on 3 days in a row, then he'll be able to take 1 foot outside and put it back in. And if he does that right, there's like this like crazy like chart, and you know, it was like Rube Gold. It was maddening. And they just lost, Lisa and I. And what I did know was that as soon as I picked this amazing kid up, he was calm as could be and happy. And so you guys already know, you parents who are listening, you know how this story ends. So then I ask him, right, once I can, so what was going on with all those outbursts? Well, he names a specific teacher, who I'm not going to name, who treated him like an idiot. And it drove him bananas, as it would drive you and I bananas. And he kind of had enough. And so when she would do one of her things, whether it was talking to him really slowly or even like asking him to do something that was really beneath him, he would just kind of lose it. I'm done with this crap, right? And so what's really fascinating about this story, so I do learn all that from Jamie. We talk about it very explicitly in the book, and he gives me all the, you know, this is the thing. We get all the, I mean, we know which teachers treated him great and which ones didn't. We know everything now. Like, we didn't know this stuff before. It's scary for those teachers who are on the wrong side of that. It's scary for them. You know, we're sitting on this info, you know. So what happens is, like, Jamie becomes fluent, right? He becomes amazing. And we want him to be, he likes hearing this part of the story. We want him to be like taught in the right classroom and, you know, presumption of competence. The problem is none of the BCBAs will let the letter board into their classroom, which we can talk about in a second.
Yes.
Luckily for us, there's this amazing teacher who happens to teach the highest academic class at his school, and she's not a BCBA. And she's like, this is bullshit. He can come in my class. I'm not, you know, this is a miracle. This child needs to be appreciated and loved and studied. And I mean, she's like the person who we all wish could be our child's teacher. We have that woman. We're just very lucky. And she's also tough, right? So she's from New Jersey. So, you know, you can imagine in New Jersey and in Oregon, no one's going to mess with her. So she's like, no, I got this kid. You guys back off, right? And she's got seniority and everybody kind of leaves her alone. So she takes Jamie under her wing, and all these subversives, they say to her, well, you know, he had a lot of behavioral issues. So how are you going to manage that in a classroom without aids, right? Because these are all like the high-end academic verbal kids. She's like, I'll take care of it. He hasn't had one issue. Not one. And we've been in school the whole time. During lockdown, Jamie's been in school since June. All right. So we're talking about now, how many months is that? 9 months of data. We have not had a single outburst or problem. And as one of the S2C practitioners explained to me, yeah, we call that top-down regulation, which is a nice word for people are not driving him bananas anymore.
So let's talk a little bit about the resistance from the school, because it's also the overall resistance, you know, with speech therapists. It's not just the BCBAs. And I want people to know, because when they pick up your book, they read it, they're going to be like me after chapter 4. They're just going to call up a center. They're not going to wait till the end of the book.
No reason.
Right. And they're going to mention it to their speech therapist, and their speech therapist might be very mild, like mine was, where she just said, there's no studies to show that this is, and I, of course, had to tell her about the nature study. So let's just talk a little bit so people know and they're prepared with what happened at Victory and what's going on overall.
So important. So important. I'm really glad that you brought that up. So when we were back at Growing Kids Therapy, Elizabeth Vossler warned me, and I didn't really believe her because it seemed so preposterous. Because I said, hey, we have this wonderful autism school. And it is a wonderful school, by the way. It's run by wonderful people. But they're a microcosm for what's happening nationally. And Elizabeth said, do they do ABA at your son's school? I said, yeah, they do with the younger kids. And she said, do they have BCBAs on staff? I said, yeah, they definitely do. She said, well, then it's going to be a real problem. And I was like, really? She's like, yep. Okay. So, the two people who run the school are not BCBAs, and they're wonderful women. And one of them's a mom of a non-speaker. Right. So I figure, okay, this can happen. We start talking about this very openly, right? As Jamie has literally become fluent, meaning he's now cranking out on the board and saying all these things and telling us. And he's in a classroom of non-speakers. And of course, we feel morally compelled to tell every parent what we've experienced and how we did it and everything else. There are BCBAs who go around behind our back and talk most of the parents out of trying this. Okay. That was like I'm like, oh, okay, here we go again, right? This is like, of course, right? The miracle of his life, and like his friends are being talked out of it by his own teachers. Here's what's going on. The fundamental issue is that there are people who don't believe it's the children who are saying the words coming out of the board. Okay, they think it's a Ouija board. They think that in some way, the communication partner who's sitting there holding the board, and by the way, people mistakenly refer to this as facilitated communication, which is when you literally put hand over hand and move the hand around a board. It's not, because you never physically touch the child. So it doesn't meet the definition of facilitated communication, and it never has. But to be fair, when they first start teaching the kids to use the board, they do a lot of prompting, hand prompts and verbal prompts. Hands up, eyes up, arms down. Like there's a lot going on because they're basically have on training wheels. Okay, and people will take snippets of that kind of video and they'll say, see, this isn't even the child, and they'll be super dismissive of it. That's really sad and pathetic, right? And there are so many ways to refute that idiocy that it makes steam come out of my head as I talk about it, but I'll just give you the simplest one.
Yep.
There are a bunch of these kids who started out on an 8-letter stencil like you just showed,
yep,
who are now typing independently, okay? Meaning that they are typing on a keyboard that is in a fixed position, okay? Meaning they no longer have any interaction with the communication partner. And you know what they say? They say the letter board helped me get here. And my question to every cynic and detractor and idiot out there is, how many of those kids do you need? Is one enough? Because it's enough for me. Do you need 15? Do you need 12? Do you need 35? How many do you need to tell you that S2C is the thing that got them to this point? And I am bearing witness with my own son in real time, this very thing. Okay, so we switched to the keyboard when he declared that he was ready for it. And his volume of writing has gone up exponentially since he's gotten on a keyboard. There's just something about being able to see the feedback mechanism and not having me have to say the words for him. He hits return and you heard it, it says it itself. He said to me the other day, I don't think I'm going to need my communication partner for much longer. I want to be independent. Okay, so now all our focus is on finding a way, because there is a transition required, because these children are going through a therapeutic process that takes time, no different than someone who'd be learning to walk after a stroke or something. So the first and most obvious refutation of all the BS about the boards is, what about the kids on the fixed keyboards? And how many do you need? Because there's plenty. All right, go to Elizabeth Vossler. They literally, I've seen them myself, okay? And now I'm watching one do it in real time. The second thing is, there are many things that Jamie has shared with his spelling practitioners on the letterboards that they could have never known about him.
Right.
Facts about his life that they simply didn't know, and I sat in the room as he spelled it for them, okay? And then the third thing is, thank God there's a scientist at UVA who did an eye tracking study, where he literally, I can't explain all the science, but what he basically concluded was, given the speed with which their eyes are moving, and if I think we'll be able to do it even here on the video. I don't like to use Jamie as like some kind of like trial monkey for these idiots.
Of course, I understand.
But he's actually just going to be doing it because he is going to be spelling. You'll see his eyes go back and forth between the keyboard and the iPad because he's very engaged and he's trying to get his words out. And so
just be natural.
Yeah. And so what happened was ASHA, which is the American Speech Hearing Association, they put out a statement and they repudiated what's known as RPM, which is a cousin of S2C. And they kind of threw S2C in there as well. And they repudiated it in, I believe, 2018 in a statement. Elizabeth Vossler wrote an amazing rebuttal. Hundreds of spellers wrote amazing rebuttals. And that thing still sits out there looming. And so for a cynical SLB or BCBA or one who's scared about their governing body coming down on them, they stay away from the boards. They've been told to stay away from the boards. And like in our case, one of them decided to get so industrious, she went around and talked all the parents out of trying, and I don't want you to have false hope, and there's no science backing this up, and all these negative things. And it was really heartbreaking. And what happened, Dara, was so she did that, and we were in the early stages of Jamie becoming a fluent speller. So we waited a few months and just went about our merry way. And then Jamie got really, really fluent on the boards. And then we would invite the families over one by one. And here's what's true. They had no idea what we really meant when we said he's fluent on a letterboard. And when a parent would sit down and see Jamie in person cranking on the board, first of all, they would be in heaving, sobbing tears, right? And I've had this experience now literally like 10 different times, okay? We now know in Portland, if someone calls me who has a non-speaker, I say, like, I don't want to tell you the whole story. I want you to come over. Smart. It always wins. It always wins, right? It always, I mean, we had a family who I never even met, wasn't even part of our school. Their son was like 25 and they'd heard about it, and they come over and they're really good parents, and they have this beautiful non-speaker who's just like Jamie. And I mean, we're 10 minutes into it. They're sitting on either side of Jamie, watching him on the board and just bawling and asking him questions, and he's just cranking things. I mean, they're on a plane to San Diego to see Don Marie like within 6 days, right? They're out of there, right? So we kind of cycle back with all these families, and they don't, just kind of like what you said, like when parents say like, oh, well, my kid can spell. It's like, you don't get it. Like, he's literally in a conversation with us and he's engaged and he's got his own part. In fact, because he's just sitting here listening, I just want to ask, Jamie to fill in the blanks a little bit. So what I'm going to do, just so people understand, I'm on a laptop. Okay. That's what I'm seeing you through Zoom on.
Yeah. Sitting
right next to me is an iPad.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just like a day's worth of conversation with Jamie. I mean, this is not much at all. Okay. It's all spelled by him. Okay. And so this is Proloquo for Text, which is an app that you can purchase. So, and it's connected via Bluetooth to what's called Apple's Magic Keyboard. Okay. So this is, I mean, you can literally order it on, whatever, apple.com. Here's Apple's Magic Keyboard. So it's connected to Proloquo for Text. Sorry, I'm just getting myself ready here. And
thank you, Dara.
And I turned the keyboard on, and then I hold, sorry, my iPad just fell. I'll fix that. Then I put a little ring on the back, right? So I can hold the keyboard for Jamie.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I've been doing, we've probably been on the keyboard now like a month. I've slowly been moving the board down to where then I'll let it rest on a table, right? As we're beginning the transition. And sometimes he'll lift the board back up because he likes the way it feels for him. But then I'll put it back down and he'll continue to type. And so we're working through that very transition I talked about. So James, just help me out. What do you want to tell Darren?
Well, I would love to ask Jamie. Jamie, tell me what inspired you to ask your father so that you could write this book with him.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think everyone can do this.
So he said, I think everyone can do this. I think that So like when he went back to school and he was in the right classroom, there was in summer school, I was his communication partner, and then he didn't want dad at school anymore. So in September, we trained somebody to be his communication partner who now goes to school with him every day. And one of his friends from his old class had like a huge meltdown right in front of us.
Oh.
It really, really, really hit Jamie hard because he knew he'd been one of the families that had been talked out of trying. And it really, really hit Jamie hard. And he is extremely connected to his friends and his family. That is his world. Okay. He's not on social media, doesn't use a computer, doesn't hang out in the outer world. I mean, he has his priorities straight, like more than any human being I know. And so to see a friend of his suffering like that hit him really hard. And so when he says, I think everyone can do this, that's really his big thing. He knows all his buddies are capable. You want to tell me more about it? I hate speaking for him.
I would love to ask him another question, if that's okay. Jamie, I would love to know what you want other parents or non-speaking individuals that are going to watch this podcast with, because we hope that it gets shared wide and far. What do you want to say to any of them? Either the parents or the non-speaking individuals?
I think parents need to believe.
So I want to build on what that means a little bit, because I've had these conversations with Jamie and I've seen this in detail. So, we sent a family down to San Diego to begin, working on the board, and I had some insight into what it was like. And one of the parents just really had not made it to the presumed competence stage. And it allowed them to be really frustrated, like, the letter's over there, like not recognizing the motor disability nature of this and how hard our children are really trying the whole time when they're doing this. And like, they get immediately the freedom that this could potentially give them. They really do. And what Jamie and I have talked about is that, yeah, he wants every non-speaker to be released from the prison of silence that he found himself in. He said that in those words. But we both recognize that the non-speakers are completely at the mercy of their parents. They can't do it themselves. They can't call up, a practitioner locally, schedule an appointment, drive themselves down there and get going. They are at the mercy of their parents, and you're asking parents to make this absolutely huge cognitive leap into believing that what I'm saying is actually true. And I understand how hard this is. I think some parents who I talk to, and I've talked to, dozens, if not 100 at this point, some parents immediately get there. They're like, yeah, I always knew that. I always knew that. And now you're telling me there's a way to get it out. Great, I'm gone. And others are like it's really hard for them to wrap their head around. And so when Jamie says, I think parents need to believe, I can't understate that enough. Like, they need to know that you believe in them. They need to know that you have confidence. And if they don't spell like Jamie spells in the first 5 sessions, that doesn't mean it's not going to come. Without that parental belief, these kids are stuck. They got nobody.
And I just want to bring one thing up, because I've read your book and I've had a few sessions, so I have a teeniest bit of experience. A lot of parents don't understand that just because the child can't pick up this piece of paper and start pointing to stuff on their own and tell you doesn't mean anything, because I just want to impress upon parents, it's this motor planning that you spoke about that is in fine motor, which most of our children have, it's kind of off track, I'll just say. And this, when they sit there and they prompt the child in the beginning a little bit over and over, some needing it more than others, it gets them, doing this gross motor, and they do it in a very gross motor way where it's like seamless and you're holding the board, so they don't even have to worry about that hand holding the board. So I think parents just really need to know that it's just because they don't pick up some letter board that you print out on your printer for them, it doesn't mean they can't do it. They have to be trained, no matter how smart they are.
Yeah, I was just say, don't do the quick test at home and then run away.
Right.
We need time to practice.
I feel like I've heard people saying that on Facebook because of your book. And when I've seen it, I've chimed in and tried to explain to them that doesn't mean anything.
So Jamie just spelled,
we need time to practice.
We need time to practice. And this is where I want to bring up a point of another thing that I honestly had no idea about. I hesitate to use the word most because that would imply that I have actual data, which I don't, but I have a lot of anecdotal data. Most children that I have seen who are non-speakers have severe ocular apraxia. Right. What that means is, like, if I take a pen and ask Jamie to like follow it with his eyes, he knows exactly what I've just asked him to do, but it's really hard for him to do it. He'll look, he'll turn away, he'll look, he'll turn away. And then I'll ask him, right? Because I can. He's like, I was trying to do it the whole time. Okay. If you consider that most have that disability, imagine how hard it is to jump up and down this board. It's still challenging for Jamie to get from Z to A because going up is where his apraxia is most pronounced. But that's just a Jamie specific thing. We had one kid who came into our house to do a lesson, and we had all these things like on a wall behind where he was working. He had such distracted eyes that he couldn't control. We had to take everything down off the wall, and then they had to cover like 2/3 of the board just to let his eyes sit in one place for a while. Can you imagine how much time it's going to take? You can get there, but that takes real time. And no one had ever diagnosed Jamie with ocular apraxia. I'd never even heard of it. And yet, literally every kid who I've now seen who's a non-speaker in his classroom, who are now all starting to do it, right? The epilogue is that the parents came around. They all have ocular apraxia in different ways. And they all need slightly different programs, and it's going to take each of them slightly different amounts of time. So if you do some ignorant litmus test in your own house, I mean, you're doing your kid a giant, giant, giant disservice. And, you know, I am still reconciling the many, many different ways that I've behaved with an ableist mindset. It still comes up all the time, right? And whenever we put our own lens on their behavior, we do so at an extreme disservice to them. There are so many things we have misinterpreted about our kids, and I don't go to it in great detail in the book, but I've talked about it in an essay on my blog, jbhandleyblog.com, this idea of initiation. Initiation is very, very difficult for our non-speakers. It's a motor-driven issue, and what that means is they could be sitting there wanting very desperately to do something, and they cannot get their body to cooperate with them. Okay.
I was just going to ask Jamie about that now. Do you mind if I ask him?
No, go ahead.
I think it's so interesting for parents. So Jamie, you know, reading the book, it was, and I've had a conversation with your dad where he explained a little bit more detail. I think it's very interesting for parents that sometimes someone will ask you to do something, I guess at school or at home, and it's not that you don't want to do it. Can you explain sometimes why you don't do something? It's not because you're not listening, and it's not because you're, you know, so you explain to parents how it is.
Go ahead. He just hit the delete key, correcting himself.
I just can't move my body.
See, and I think that's so important for parents to understand that it's not just speaking. It's sometimes you just can't, you know, with my son, I could ask him a million times to do something, and, you know, he's got to practically wait to be threatened. It's horrible, and I feel terrible. But now I understand more because of. A friend
of mine was down in San Diego doing S2C lessons, and she was staying in a hotel with her son, just the two of them. And she went outside to put the room service tray on the ground in the hallway, and, you know, the door shut behind her. Like, we've all almost done that or done that. And so she starts banging on the door. Her son is a big kid and physically able and understands what it means to open a door. Banging on the door, banging on the door. He wouldn't respond. She had to go get, you know, a manager to let her back in. And at that point, her son was fluent on the board. And what he explained was, and he was terrified and he was really frustrated. He was sitting on the bed. He knew what had happened to mom. But the combination of the typical motor planning challenges that he had, combined with the stressful situation, locked him down. Right? And so somebody naive would say he didn't even understand that I was outside, and, you know, his concept of space, you know, they'd go down this whole path, when in fact what happened was he was literally like frozen. He was frozen with the combination of his own motor disability and the stress of the moment. And he was incredibly apologetic and felt terrible about it because, of course, he wanted to help his mom and he couldn't in that moment.
Wow. And I think the other interesting thing for parents in your book is Jamie talks about his stims and how, and someone, I think it is Vince, someone writes a really wonderful quote about, you know, a lot of times a non-speaking person can have all these things that they do. And I'd love Jamie, if you don't mind explaining sometimes what the stims are about, because parents look at, you know, someone who's stimming and of course that's when they are thinking things, when they're not understanding what it is about.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
They help me calm down.
Right.
They help me calm down. I mean, some people tap nervously, right, when they're anxious or restless leg or, you know, whatever. He's helped us understand that, you know, we don't need to behaviorally quell his stims. We might view them as a sign for conversation, but we also know that that's part of what he does to help keep himself regulated. And, you know, behaviorists will like want to tie their arms to a chair. I'm not implying they do that, but you know what I mean? Like they'll, oh, no, put your hands down and, you know, this and that. I think he said, I think it's in the book, they help me calm the inner movement beast.
Yes.
Another term that he used.
And I love the part in the book where he talks about he made you rewrite the chapter about the school because you had written it a little bit more harshly because you were still a little angry about their resistance to S2K. And I'm just going to say his quote, which I thought was just grace, you know, full of grace, and it's very noble. They meant well. They were just ignorant.
You know, I think like he communicates so succinctly, it like blows me away sometimes. I think partially due to like, it's just harder to get the words out. And so he's going to be really precise with his language. And that happened. I read him each chapter and then we would talk about it. And yeah, I was really angry. I was particularly angry at the woman who had gone around and talked all the parents out of trying S2C. I just felt like that was really reprehensible. And I absolutely let some of that leak out into the book. And I see this in other children who are like Jamie, who've come fluent late, and they have such grace. They have such forgiveness. They have such perspective. They all have a little bit of Buddha in them. And, you know, again, I'm going to dangerously extrapolate because, of course, I don't really know. But you can't help but think that all that time, kind of like in their own head, watching all the idiots, us collectively, do our thing, they develop some real perspective. And we have had hard conversations, and we have had deeply emotional moments with Jamie when he, you know, he's had nightmares where he thinks back to the time before, you know, and some really, really strong feelings came out early on, as we could all imagine. And yet the primary feeling that he has is gratitude. And, you know, we had a very recent experience. There's a class at Jamie's school that his teacher wanted him to take and he wanted to take. And the BCBA, there was a BCBA who's apparently a great teacher, and he was teaching the class. And we said, well, Jamie wants to take the class, right? This is an autism school, inclusion.
Right.
Like, so we're formally asking for him to go in that classroom so he can learn. And so the head of school went to the guy who's teaching the class, who again is beloved and like a well, you know, like teacher. She said, Jamie wants to take the class with his communication partner. Well, they first asked us, well, can he take the class without his communication partner? Which, as you can imagine, it's like, are you out of your effing mind? Like, that's insane to ask that, right?
Of course.
And they retracted that. Okay, you're right. Let's go ask the teacher. He apparently, according to him, I can't prove it, went to whatever governing body he kneels to, and they told him no. And so the school, the school switched him out. And now a new teacher is teaching that class, and Jamie gets to go in the class. I mean, that's the kind of shit that we're still dealing with. It's crazy.
And meanwhile, I want to mention to people, because I find it fascinating. I know that Jamie has plans to go to college and study neuroscience, and he's really adept at math, which it's wonderful. I mean, I can't imagine what it was like not to be able to do all that he's so talented with. But there are children isn't there one at Harvard and one at UC Berkeley who letter boards? I mean, they're children at other colleges, but we're talking like top colleges even.
Yeah,
and I'm sure there'll be more.
I want to emphasize, Jamie is not the pioneer here, okay? So Elizabeth Vossler's number, and who am I to tell her she's wrong, is somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 kids communicating on a letterboard. Now, I think the number of non-speakers with an autism label is between 3 and 5 million, okay? And so 1,000 or 1,500 is still tiny, but there have been a number of spellers using a number of different communication devices, by the way, actual, letterboards, some S2C, some RPM, some AAC, some have graduated to a keyboard. They all, whatever method gets you there, great. I only write about S2C because that's all we did. I'm not dissing on any other, method. They're in college. Yep. Colleges are learning to accommodate these kids. And every single kid that I've met, and I've probably met a dozen in person, either wants to go to college or is beginning that process because, again, the dozen or so that I've met are highly, highly intelligent, and academics are very, very important to them. Jamie went from them doing rudimentary bead counting math with him to he's being tutored in calculus by an outside tutor. And she turned to us and said, and this woman who teaches him has a PhD in chemistry, but she's also great in all subjects, including calculus. And she said, I'm starting to hit the outer boundary of my math competency for Jamie. I think we're going to need to find a college professor who's open, right, to this difference in order to continue to push him. And so the truth is that we have no idea where his outer boundary lies when it comes to math. And Jamie explains to us that math is like hearing his name. Math makes me happy. Math makes me feel good. I've seen him in math classes where he's being pushed with complex material. He's laughing and smiling the whole time. It's like it brings joy to his brain.
Wow, that's incredible. Oh my God. So, and I want to let parents know who are watching, or, other non-speaking individuals who may be starting S2K, is that I
want to correct you, S2C, not S2K.
Sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
There are so many blogs and there are so many books written by non-speaking individuals, and they talk about being silent for 30 years and having all these abilities and intelligence. And so I think it's really great for parents to go and learn from people who have already been through this communication and, are fluent, so they can see and understand that they were just like their child might appear right now.
Totally.
It's really important. And I just want to ask Jamie, talk about the beginning days of when you were just learning S2C. Okay. Was it really easy, or was it a little bit difficult? Because there's other non-speaking individuals that, they might not be able to get as fluent as quickly as you. And I wouldn't want them to think that they're not going to get there. So maybe you could talk a little, tell us a little bit about that.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was very tiring at first.
He says it was very tiring at first. He was exhausted the first handful of times we did this after an hour-long session. And by the way, I want to point something out. When you go to see an S2C practitioner, they're going to do much more demonstrative prompting than what you're seeing from me right now. And that's normal. And the reason I'm sort of going, I'm just kind of giving a little tiny undertone of a verbal acknowledgement as he spells.
Yes.
We're moving towards independence, right? And so I'm actually trying to, and I'm not doing, as you can see, any physical prompting at all, because we're advanced, because we're, 16 months into practicing every single day, right? So however many days that is of practice. So kind of to your point about not wanting parents to get the wrong idea or give up too early, you'll see a real difference when you first start. But as Jamie said, it was really exhausting. Do you have more you want to say about that? Go ahead.
Yes, it got easier fast.
So he says, yes, it got easier fast.
Right.
But
And I had to warn my husband when he watched the video of Dylan, because there was a lot of that prompting. I'm saying no one touched Dylan, but there was that extra prompting with the finger pointing. And I had to explain to my husband, it's no different than when I teach Dylan cursive handwriting. Sometimes I do hand over hand, and then I let him do it.
Yeah, I would just think exactly. And like the people who want to pick on that and be cynical, they don't believe.
Right.
And they don't seek out more information. They don't go to Growing Kids Therapy and meet a bunch of the kids on the keyboards. You know what I mean? They don't believe. And so and I'm not implying this is where your husband is, but they grab onto the first thing that gives them the opportunity to doubt it. And, if you have a parent or a teacher with that mindset, you're not going to get there. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like you're not ready to believe yet, I guess, because you do have to appreciate that it is a continuum and they are training wheels at first. And the place they can get is the place like where Jamie is and beyond.
Absolutely.
It can be hard. It can be hard to have the faith.
And I would love to read one of your friend's words. I wrote down a few of them. I would just love to read one of them. Jamie, who would you like me to read from the book? I have Vince's words, his paragraph. I have Danny Whitty, and then I have Ethan. Which of the three do you think I should read? I want parents to hear, one of your friends from the book, what they wrote, because
Jamie went with Ethan. I think he's going with the local connection because Ethan is in Portland as well.
Okay, so let me read Ethan's words, and these are included in your book among some other, friends of yours. Respect only comes when others view you as having worth. I had no equity in silence. I needed to deposit my words in the perceptual bank of human connections. Only in this account do I own any collateral. This bothers me. Humans should bestow kindness in places they don't often travel. I shouldn't have to please you to get your respect.
So Ethan, Jamie is on this weekly, we call it the Dude Bro Social Hour. In fact, it's supposed to be today, but we're all on spring break. And it's somewhere between 4 and 6 boys who show up every week and have conversations, and they're close friends, and they've used Zoom as a way to build their bond. And Ethan, he is that eloquent, with everything he says, right? He's just got this remarkable, not just a vocabulary, but a lot of the things he says are metaphors, and you have to kind of think about what you just heard and what's really he's just this incredibly rich vocabulary. So I'm so happy when he took the time to write an essay for the book, and everybody just got a sense of how sophisticated this beautiful mind of this boy really is. And this is one of Jamie's, good buddies.
All the boys in the book. Oh my God.
Incredible.
You know what I mean? And the point that you're making is so many of our children probably have that in them, that depth, that intelligence, that, charisma, the sense of humor, whatever it is for that child.
I think we're down to a debate about most versus all.
Okay.
Right? That's the debate I think we're down to. If you ask Elizabeth Vossler, I wouldn't want to speak for her, but I think her vote would be all.
All. I agree with you.
And that's my vote. I'll be the first to acknowledge that I can't prove that.
No, I agree with you.
But Jamie, who would I listen to more than him? His vote is all. And when you start to think in those terms, like on the one hand, it's like really exhilarating to imagine all these families kind of getting their lives back, and most importantly, these non-speakers getting their lives back. And at the same time, you think about the scale of tragedy of those who are sitting there being misunderstood, on brain drugs, in institutions, whatever it might be, profoundly frustrated, never allowed. I mean, it can also overwhelm you with darkness. And we've chosen to take the optimistic path that enough parents. Here's what I think. The amount of positive energy that a family feels once they have a fluent non-speaker, like that's going to manifest. I just really believe that, because like the weight that it's taken off of this family and off our son and the joy that we have. And I write about this in the book. I am not exaggerating, and I'm not the most religious person. Every night I thank God for this blessing. Without fail. It never doesn't occur to me to express my gratitude. Whatever set of events got us to this point, it's changed everything about the fabric of our family and the way we approach the world and how we think about the future. It's made everything joyful. It's kept everything in perspective from the day this happened. Nothing's kind of gotten us down, and we've been through our set of challenges like every family has. And it is literally like gumdrops and unicorns and rainbows in our family since the time that we've been able to have Jamie back in our life. And I want to be clear, he was always here. We just didn't know it. He didn't come back. We just finally got to know him the way he always knew himself. And we wish that for everybody else.
And I love how he does not hold a grudge. And I think most all our kids are as graceful as him. You know, they and it's beautiful that he's not upset, that he's so happy, you know. And I'll let him explain. Jamie, tell us what you talk about in the book when your dad asks you in the question and answer area if you are angry at him that, you know, that he didn't know, that he, you know, he didn't think that you were as, you know, smart as you are and as talented.
Doing great. Yeah, you got it. Go ahead.
I'm so happy he never gave up.
That's beautiful. That's grace. Jamie, I want to tell you how much you've changed me from, I read your book twice. And by the way, it's a totally different book after you start Spelling to Communicate. I urge anybody who reads it once and then they start it, read it a second time. I can't explain to you, it's a different book to me now.
I've never heard that, but that makes perfect sense to me.
Oh no, it's a completely different book. The whole time I was reading it, I kept saying to my husband, oh my God, this is so different now. You know, and I've read so many books a second time. I've never had that experience. But Jamie, I want to tell you how much you've changed me. So right after I read the book, I was putting together a birthday present for my husband, and it was a frame that had 4 pictures. And I normally always just did that with my daughter because I would get the feedback right away, which pictures to put in. But anyways, I was like, I'm going to do this with Dylan. And Dylan and I spent so much time together. And Dylan, I, you know, of course, asked him the questions, like, you know, and he would give me his short answers or just whatever. And we put this together, and I picked up one of the pictures, and it was my daughter on the beach with him. He was holding an apple. He was 5 years old and she was 1, and she was like coming at the apple like a vulture. And I laughed and I said, do you remember this moment? Do you remember? And, you know, he starts laughing. And so we're having more of these moments together that we wouldn't normally have because I wasn't presuming, you know, that connection. And, you know, I'm very excited, you know, for the Spelling to Communicate. And because I know, I've always known I'm going to get him more communicative than he is today. I've, you know, like you, I've never given up ever, and I never will. You know,
Jamie, Jamie's responding to you. Hang on one sec.
Yep.
that makes me so happy.
Aw, I'm glad. I'm glad I told you that story. No,
I mean, I relate. It happens to us every day still. Ways that we realize we're either not including him or doing too many things for him or way too many verbal prompts when he can handle it himself, or seeking his feedback about a decision we're about to make. And you realize all these patterns and ruts that you've just fallen into to survive and deal with the situation. And even now, I get woken up sometimes and go, of course, I should have asked him. What am I doing? Right? It's just part of the deal.
Yeah, no, forever change. So before, I want you guys to explain where that people can get the book and then about your movie, but I would love to leave off with Jamie. If there's anything else that you want to say or you want parents to know, just any kind of message that you want to leave on, because and I urge everybody to read your book once, read it twice, and to please try Spelling to Communicate, or at least look into it.
Go ahead.
Just do it.
We're from Portland, so I guess, I told you he's like succinct, it's like, just do it.
I wish everybody was like that.
Yeah.
Right?
The book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I'm sure it's on other sites at this point. It comes out tomorrow, so a lot of parents will get it. I would just tell parents, it's a really quick read. It was designed to be. It's a narrative, and the purpose of the way the book was written was it's really just written for parents, right? Like, that's the only audience that I care about, Jamie cares about. And so I wanted them to be inside my head and my family's life in an intimate way so that they could imagine it for themselves. That was the purpose of the book. So it's not scholarly. My last book was super scholarly with all kinds of, there's not even a citation in my whole book, right? Like, it's just to tell the story.
Just the nature study, that's it.
Exactly, right. One study. Yeah. And the hope is that by the end of the book, people are like, yeah, that sounds enough like my family, and I can appreciate what they went through and the doubts they had, that I'm going to give this a try too. It's like a bridge of hope that Honey gave for me. That's the purpose of the book, is to be a bridge of hope, really, for people. There's a movie. It's a slow process. So I don't know if it's going to be out in 3 months or 6 months or a year. I really don't know. It's unbelievable. We've gotten some video of kids breaking open for the first time. We just got really lucky where we were like in the room when it happened with the cameras. And what Jamie said was, like, I don't want to be the star of the movie. So his friends are in there in a much more complete way. There's some dyads, which is just two guys in a room having conversations. We knew, I don't want to say that any of this is written or in order to assuage the doubters, because ultimately I really don't care. If you're going to doubt, that's fine. You weren't the audience anyway, but if you were a doubter, do not watch this movie, right? I just hope it propels even more families to give it a try, because we'll still lose some where they go do the home test or don't understand the magnitude of what we're talking about in terms of true communication. And I get that. People are nervous, paralyzed, scared of hope, done too many things, been promised too many things from too many people. I get it. So I hope the movie will maybe even open more people's eyes than the book does down the road. So, and that too was at Jamie's behest. And again, he really wanted all his buddies in the movie. So they're all stoked. They like the Hollywood angle, and there's some sweet video of them surfing, and it's cool. You know what I mean? It's cool movie. And they all talk about it. When's the movie coming out? And, are you in it? And one of the guys couldn't be in it because he was kind of late to the party and he's all bent out of shape. And, they all want to be in the movie. So, it's been a really fun process. So it'll come out at some point.
Awesome. And then where can people look to hear more from either one of you? Are there any blogs or anything?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure how many more of these interviews we're going to do. Jamie's kind of getting tired of them. And, it's a little nerve-wracking for him to be on camera and to be spelling on camera. When I explained to him, what a friendly you are, right, in terms of someone who really gets it and is a parent, then he's down. but we don't have many more of those left. So I think we're kind of going to head off into the sunset pretty soon. I wrote a blog at jbhandleyblog.com, kind of providing some more insight to the notion of initiation. But I think in general, people are going to have to rely on the book and on their own journey, right? And we're not going to spend a lot of time promoting, to be honest. I think the word of mouth will achieve everything we want to achieve. It was never about how many books we could sell. Sorry, publisher, but it's not. It was just about getting it into the hands. Yeah, it's just about getting it into the hands of parents. And so, honestly, we're like on the tail end of our PR tour with this interview with you. We might have I think we do a book signing on Wednesday virtually with Jenny McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy. They're going to join us just because they both know Jamie personally, and that's kind of cool. And then we're done, and we're in Hawaii, and we're just going to go. We're just going to go enjoy the beach. And I've told my wife and I've told Jamie like we're doing this to help as many people as we can because of the kind of moral duty to do so. But then, as you know, living in the outer world is tiring, right? And giving people a glimpse of our personal life, which we give through the book, that's a little exhausting, and you feel a little vulnerable about it. And we're a more private family. I don't really enjoy it, but I knew it was necessary to kind of convince people that they could do this too. And then we're going to just move on and focus on him and making up for lost time. And, I hope every family has that joy and ability to focus on the inner world, their own domestic life, and helping Jamie fulfill all his dreams. And I don't know if we'll document that or ever talk about it publicly again. So this might be the end for us. And I hope to hear messages over the years from families for whom this book was a spark, much as Honey Rinicello was a spark for us, right? She gave us a great gift. And so we're paying it forward. And I hope that they pay it forward too and decide to, do it in their own way at the right time for them as a family as well.
Okay. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being here today. This was wonderful. And it was great for viewers to, hear your insightful comments and to watch you, on the keyboard. It was fantastic. And I can't wait to hear more about what you do in the future, because I know you're going to do great things. You already have.
Hang on one sec. He's going to respond. Go ahead.
Thank you.
He said, thank you. You can go play, dude. You're good.
All right. Well, you guys
He's got more pancakes to have, so he'll be good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to thank all my viewers for watching the Every Choice Counts podcast. Have a wonderful day.